When we love somebody, their life is a part of our life. So they are a part of us, and we actually in some ways give them a piece of our heart. And when that person dies, we don't get that piece back. It's gone, it's missing, and we feel that, and we only grieve the things that we love. So when we love somebody, they are a part of us. Their life is a part of our life, and we actually give them a piece of our heart. And when that person dies, we don't get that piece of our heart back. It is gone, it's missing, and we feel its loss. So personally, I can speak only to what the Christian faith has to say about death and loss and grief. And in our tradition, we speak of the comfort of a reasonable and holy hope in the joyful expectation of eternal life with those we love. That is the comfort of the Christian faith, that death is not the end. And when my own dad died, the day after he died, I was actually talking with a colleague of mine. And in an attempt to comfort me, he said, "I'm sorry about the loss of your dad." And without even thinking, I just responded, "Oh, he's not lost. I may not see him anymore, but he's not lost." And that is that reasonable and holy hope that death is not the end, that we will see each other again, not in this life. I may not see him here, but he's not lost. The first everything after somebody that you love dies is just awful. It sharpens the grief, it sharpens the pain that we feel. My dad died 3 years ago. He died the day after my birthday, and while I had experienced death and grief before, this was really the first time since I'd gotten sober. I actually didn't know what grief felt like physically to me until then, and I couldn't figure out why my chest hurt. And then I realized that that's what grief feels like to me. C.S. Lewis said to him it felt like fear, but to me it is physical pain right in the center of my chest. And so all of those milestones every year that we would normally celebrate with those people, and we get to them for the first time and they're not with us, that comes back. We get that sensation again. And December is always a challenging month for me because both of my parents' birthdays are in December. Dad would be next week, it'd be the 13th. Then we've got Christmas. I have my own wedding anniversary on the 28th. So there are all these things that Dad should be present for, and he's not. And so because I expect him to be there, because he's always been there before, I notice his absence much more acutely. Christmas can be especially difficult because everybody wants to celebrate, and that first year that someone has died, we don't understand that. It's not just, how can I celebrate, but how can anyone celebrate? Don't they know what's happened? Don't they understand? And so that makes us feel out of place because we feel like, oh, everybody else is happy, I should be happy, and then when we're not, we don't necessarily know what to do with that. We're always afraid that when we run into people that they're either gonna say something or they're not gonna say something, and we sort of dread both of those. Because people want to celebrate and be happy at the holidays, if we're grieving, we feel like they don't want to see it. They don't want to see us because our grief becomes a burden to them. And so we start to feel like we are a burden to them. So we feel isolated, we feel cut off. All of this comes up in that first year. We think often about grief as a thing that we are supposed to get over, like it's going to be with us for a little while and then it's going to be gone. I don't find that to be true. We don't really ever stop missing that person. We always are aware that they are not with us. But what happens over time is that that's not the only sensation that we have. It's not the only thing that we feel when we remember them, right? That's why Christmas actually is really important to me, because along with missing my dad, it also reinforces that promise of a reasonable and holy hope. And so I get to have both of those together. I still miss him, but I'm reminded that it won't be forever, that this is not the end, that he's not lost.
And that brings comfort?
It does. Yeah, I can feel the sadness. I can feel the fact that I miss him, but I'm not overwhelmed by him. I don't stop missing him because I haven't stopped loving him. I would tell people to feel what they feel and not apologize for it. If they're sad, if they're grieving, then do it. Those feelings are authentic. You're going to feel that way whether you acknowledge it or not. So just go ahead and don't let people tell you that you shouldn't feel that way, that you should just be able to get over it. That's neither true nor helpful. One of the other sort of well-intentioned things that people will say is that, well, there's got to be some reason that this happened. There must be some meaning for me to get from this, and I don't find that helpful at all. Things happen, sometimes wonderful, joyful things, and sometimes terrible, difficult, painful things, and looking for meaning in those never helps me. What I try to do instead is to look for a purpose. So if this is how I'm feeling, if that's what's going on, what can I do at this moment? With the way that I'm feeling, does that allow me to be more compassionate for other people who are feeling the same way? Can I connect with them in some way and in some ways be useful or helpful to them? To have a purpose in time of grief and when we're feeling overwhelmed is enormously helpful. It gives us something to do with how we're feeling. Children always know when adults are not telling them the truth. We think we can hide it from them, but we can't. They know. So be honest with them. Let them talk about how they're feeling. Talk to them honestly about your own feelings. That this is what it's like when I get sad. Let's talk about why you're sad. Let's talk about the things about that person that you really loved. What was it that made them happy? What was it that made you happy when you were with them? That helps them hold on to the good memories that they have. It keeps those things alive for them, and those will stay with them and be a comfort for them. Maybe not immediately. We can't make people stop being sad. Dealing with isolation, with feeling alone, especially in times of celebration, is enormously difficult because we can't always fix that in the moment. What we can do is to try to put structures in our life ahead of time that keep us from being isolated. One of the things that I've been fascinated about lately is this notion of a third place, that we have sort of lost a sense of a third place in our culture, one that isn't our home, one that isn't where we work, but another place where we build relationships and connections to help us not be isolated. For a lot of people, church used to be the third place, but it's not anymore. Other institutions sort of serve that role as a third place, and so it's not necessarily helpful in the immediate situation, but to ask ourselves, what do I enjoy doing? What feeds me? What gives me life? What makes me feel alive? And if we can figure out what that thing is, then we look for, where is that thing around me? Where can I plug in and find those connections that I'm missing other places? So Christmas and all the trappings that are associated with it, all the images that we see of it, those aren't really real. They are illusions that are carefully curated to show us how things ought to be. And so when our life doesn't match that picture of how things ought to be, we assume that there's something wrong with us. I tell people all the time, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. Do what you can. Do what is within your reach. Celebrations don't have to be big and fancy. They just have to be authentic. It's an expression of love, which we can do simply and inexpensively. It doesn't have to look like we sometimes see it portrayed. It only has to be something that actually matters to us.